You have been told that manifestation is about thinking the right thoughts, repeating affirmations, visualizing your desires. But what if the reason your reality is not changing is not because you are doing it wrong, but because you are looking in the wrong direction? Carl Jung believed that true transformation does not begin with forced positivity. It begins with a journey inward, into the parts of yourself you have spent years avoiding. You have visualized the life you want with all the intensity you could summon. You have written the affirmations, spoken the intentions, and tried to believe that it is already yours. But no matter how hard you try, that dream still feels distant, like it is behind glass, visible but untouchable. You find yourself repeating old patterns, attracting the same painful relationships, sabotaging the opportunities you claimed to desire. And then comes the guilt. You wonder what you're doing wrong. You begin to believe that your thoughts are broken, that you simply do not want it badly enough. This is the hidden weight behind so much of today's manifestation culture. It tells you that your reality is your fault, but offers no real tools for transformation. It asks you to force a smile over your suffering and call it spiritual progress. And that is where this story changes. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychological minds of the 20th century, offered a radically different perspective. He asked you to look directly into the parts of yourself you have been taught to deny. He said that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is the starting point of this journey. In this video, we are going to move past the superficial techniques. We will gently dismantle the myths of manifestation and step into something deeper, something more honest. This is not about magical thinking. It is about psychological integration, how your inner world is shaping your outer one, whether you are aware of it or not. And if you are willing to do the inner work, then this may be the moment your entire reality begins to shift. Before we enter Jung's world, we need to step back and examine the room we are all already sitting in. The mental space shaped by popular manifestation culture. This space is painted in bright colors. Its walls are covered in inspirational quotes. The air is thick with unrelenting optimism, even magical. The central message is simple and seductive. Your thoughts create your reality. If you want to change your life, change your thoughts. Want wealth? Think wealthy thoughts. Want love? Think loving thoughts. And if fear, doubt, or sadness appear, you're told to replace them. On the surface, this message seems empowering. It gives you the illusion of control. It makes you feel like the creator of your world. But for many people, this approach creates a quiet kind of despair. You try to hold on to positive thoughts like a lifeline, but they slip through your fingers the moment real life hits. You catch yourself feeling afraid, or angry, or unmotivated, and suddenly you feel like a spiritual failure. You start to believe that your inner experience is the enemy. Your fear is ruining your future. Your doubt is blocking your destiny. And so, you begin the exhausting process of policing your own mind, forcing yourself to smile over your suffering and calling it growth. This is what has come to be known as toxic positivity, the belief that to be worthy, to be spiritual, to be successful, you must radiate light at all times. But Carl Jung would have seen this not as healing, but as fragmentation. He would not have encouraged you to plaster positive affirmations over your pain. He would have urged you to meet your pain face to face, because true power does not come from pretending the darkness is not there. It comes from understanding why it exists and what it is trying to tell you. Imagine your psyche as a house. One day, you find a dark patch of mold on the wall, a fear of failure, a feeling of unworthiness, a resentment buried deep in your past. The mainstream approach tells you to cover it with beautiful paint. You choose the brightest color. You tell yourself, "My wall is clean, my wall is beautiful." You say it every day. You believe it with all your heart. But beneath the surface, the mold is still there. It is growing in silence. It is spreading through the walls. And eventually the paint will bubble and peel, and the foundation will begin to crack. Because the mold was never healed, it was only hidden. This is the hidden reason so many people feel like they are failing at manifestation. They are not failing. They are simply at war with a part of themselves that they have been taught to avoid. They are saying one thing with their conscious mind: I am worthy of success, while a powerful, unconscious belief from childhood whispers the opposite. This internal conflict creates resistance. You try to manifest love, but fear intimacy. You visualize wealth, but feel shame around money. You repeat affirmations, but feel like a fraud. And all of this is happening beneath the surface, where most techniques never reach. Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche, where everything we reject about ourselves is stored. As he wrote, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. It forms an unconscious snag, thwarting our most well-meant intentions. That snag is the silent force behind many of your struggles. It is the reason your goals stall, the reason you sabotage your own progress. You're not failing to manifest. You are succeeding at manifesting what your unconscious mind believes to be true. To change your reality, you must go deeper than surface thoughts. You must descend into the basement of your psyche, where the real story is being written. And to do that, we will need a guide. To navigate the deeper regions of your inner world, you need more than good intentions. You need a guide, someone who has mapped the territory of the soul with precision, humility, and depth. That guide is Carl Jung. Jung was not a motivational speaker. He was not a guru selling a promise of overnight transformation. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, and one of the most brilliant explorers of the human psyche in modern history. His life's work was devoted to understanding the unconscious, the hidden forces within us that shape our perceptions, our relationships, our decisions, and ultimately is our destiny. While Freud saw the unconscious primarily as a vault for repressed memories and desires, Jung saw something far more expansive. He viewed the unconscious as a living intelligence, mysterious, creative, and deeply meaningful. It was not merely a place of darkness, but also a wellspring of potential. Within it lived the symbols of our dreams, the forgotten voices of our past, and the blueprint for our wholeness. Jung believed that human beings are not here to rise above the unconscious, but to enter into a dialogue with it. He called this lifelong process individuation, the integration of the conscious and the unconscious mind. It is the journey of becoming whole, of reclaiming the parts of yourself that have been lost, denied, or rejected. This brings us back to one of Jung's most powerful truths. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Let that settle in. What Jung is saying is that the events you call bad luck or repeating patterns may not be random at all. They may be echoes of unresolved conflicts within you. They may be your unconscious mind acting as a hidden author, writing chapters of your life behind the scenes. You might find yourself continually drawn to people who mistreat you. You might sabotage success right before it arrives. You might set goals and lose all the moment you get close. These are not just external obstacles. They are reflections of internal dynamics you have not met yet. Mainstream manifestation focuses on what you consciously want. Jung's work challenges you to uncover what you unconsciously believe, because often those two are not the same. And if your unconscious beliefs are in conflict with your conscious desires, the unconscious will win every time. Think of the conscious mind as a king issuing commands from a throne. But deep below the palace, a secret council meets in the dark. If the king's orders go against the will of this hidden council, the unconscious, the kingdom falls into quiet rebellion. Manifestation fails not because you did not try hard enough, but because your inner world is divided. True creation begins when the king and the council began to speak to one another, when the conscious and the unconscious enter into alignment, when your inner world becomes a unified force instead of a battleground. And at the heart of that hidden council, shaping your life in ways you may not even realize, lives one of Jung's most important and powerful discoveries: the shadow. Let's now enter the most challenging and the most transformative terrain in Jung's psychological map. The shadow is not a mystical concept, it is a profoundly human one. It refers to all the parts of yourself that you have been taught to deny, reject, or repress, because somewhere along the way you were told they were wrong, shameful, or unlovable. This includes what we typically think of as negative traits: jealousy, rage, laziness, greed, selfishness, pride. As children, we learn very quickly what is acceptable and what is not. We are told things like, "Do not be so angry," "Do not cry," "Stop being selfish," or "Good boys and girls do not act like that." To remain safe, loved, and accepted, we begin to bury those parts. We push them out of sight, out of reach, and into the unconscious. But the shadow is not composed only of what is dark. It can also contain light. A sensitive boy may repress his gentleness to avoid being seen as weak. A strong-willed girl may learn to hide her leadership to avoid being called bossy. Over time, entire aspects of the self become disowned not because they are bad, but because they were misunderstood or unwelcome. Jung wrote that, "The shadow is the thing a person has no wish to be, and yet what we repress does not vanish. It does not dissolve with time. It becomes unconscious and begins to operate from the background silently, invisibly, but powerfully." This is where the shadow becomes deeply relevant to manifestation. You consciously desire success, but your shadow carries a deep fear of visibility or a belief that success will lead to rejection. You long for a committed relationship, but your shadow harbors a disowned craving for independence or a wound that associates closeness with pain. The result is self-sabotage, not because you are broken, but because a part of you is pulling in the opposite direction. Jung warned of this when he wrote, "A man who is possessed by his shadow is always standing in his own light and falling into his own traps, living below his own level." This inner division is not a weakness, it is an invitation. It is your unconscious trying to speak to you and asking to be seen. The only way to end the sabotage is not to overpower the shadow with positive thinking. The only way is to face it honestly, humbly, and without shame. This process is called shadow work. Shadow work is the courageous act of making the darkness conscious. It begins with a simple yet difficult step: telling the truth. I am envious. I'm afraid. I do not trust myself. Not to punish yourself. Not to stay there, but to integrate what is real. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious will continue to control your life, but once it is brought into awareness, it becomes something you can work with. You can listen to it, learn from it, redirect its energy towards something meaningful. For example, when you acknowledge your suppressed anger, you might uncover the energy needed to set healthy boundaries. When you reclaim your buried ambition, you find the drive to build the life you have always wanted. The shadow holds immense power, but when it is denied, that power works against you. When it is integrated, that same power becomes a force for clarity, confidence, and creation. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the deeper truth of personal transformation. It is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. And the journey into wholeness continues as we explore one of the shadow's most subtle weapons: projection. If the shadow is the part of you that lives in darkness, then projection is how that darkness finds its way into the light by being cast onto the world around you. Projection is one of the most subtle and powerful dynamics in Jungian psychology. It is the mechanism by which you attribute your own unconscious traits, fears, or desires to other people. In other words, the things that irritate, disturb, or obsess you about others often reflect the parts of yourself that you have not yet claimed. Have you ever met someone and instantly disliked them for being arrogant or loud? It may be that you are seeing a part of yourself in them, a part you have disowned. Perhaps you were taught that being bold or confident made you selfish, and so you pushed that trait into the shadow. Now, when someone embodies it freely, it triggers something in you. Or maybe you find yourself constantly annoyed by people you perceive as lazy. You might be projecting your own need for rest, which your inner critic has labeled as weakness. You might resent in others what you are not allowing in yourself. This is not about blame. It is about awakening. It is about seeing your outer world as a mirror of your inner world, especially when the reflection is uncomfortable. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Projection is not always obvious. It can disguise itself as moral judgment, righteous anger, or even spiritual discernment. But beneath the surface, it often is your shadow trying to get your attention, trying to re-enter consciousness through the faces of those around you. And here is where projection becomes directly tied to manifestation. If you carry an unconscious belief that you are unworthy of success, you may begin to see successful people as greedy or superficial. Without realizing it, you will begin to sabotage opportunities that could lead to abundance. Because becoming like those people feels like a threat to your identity, you will unconsciously protect yourself from becoming what you judge. Or if you carry a hidden need for control that you do not want to acknowledge, you may repeatedly attract partners you perceive as controlling. In truth, you are reenacting an inner drama that lives within your own psyche. Your outer circumstances are reflecting your inner conflicts. As long as you are projecting, you're not manifesting from clarity. You are reacting from illusion. And in this state, you are not the conscious creator of your reality. You are a puppet of your shadow's projections. The work, then, is to withdraw your projections. The next time you feel a strong emotional charge towards someone, a judgment, a trigger, a fixation, pause. Ask yourself, what exactly is bothering me about this person? Then ask with honesty, is there any way, even in the smallest measure, that this trait lives in me? Have I ever acted this way? Do I wish I could? This is not about self-blame. It is about self-retrieval. Because every time you reclaim a projection, you reclaim a part of your soul. And the more whole you become, the less power the outer world has to disturb your peace. You are no longer reacting to illusions. You are responding from awareness. And that awareness begins to shape a new kind of reality, one that reflects coherence instead of conflict. This is when something remarkable begins to occur, not as a technique, but as a natural response from life itself. It is a phenomenon Jung called synchronicity. As you begin to do this inner world, facing your shadow, withdrawing your projections, something begins to change. Subtly at first, then unmistakably. You begin to notice strange coincidences. You think about someone and they call. You wrestle with a question and the answer appears on a billboard, in a book, in the words of a stranger. A pattern begins to emerge. A sense that life is no longer random but responsive. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, not just any coincidence, but a meaningful one. An event in your inner world, a thought, a feeling, a dream mirrored by an event in the outer world with no direct causal link. Yet the connection feels undeniable. To mainstream manifestation culture, these are often labeled signs from the universe. But Jung offered a more profound explanation. He believed that the inner and outer worlds are not truly separate. He called their intersection the unus mundus, the one world. Two dimensions of reality, deeply entwined. When your inner world becomes more integrated, when the conscious and unconscious begin to harmonize, life responds in kind. The outer world reflects your inner coherence. Synchronicity is not magic. It is not a trick of the mind. It is the natural outcome of psychological alignment. It is the soul speaking through the fabric of the world. These moments cannot be forced. You cannot manifest a synchronicity on demand. They arise when you stop grasping, when your desires are no longer driven by fear or lack, but emerge from a unified, whole self. Imagine walking through a forest. At first, you are lost. You stumble in circles. Every tree looks the same. But then, slowly, you begin to listen. You notice a pattern in the wind, a rhythm in your own breath. A quiet path reveals itself, not because it was not there before, but because now you are finally able to see it. That is what synchronicity feels like. A secret door opening, a reminder that you are not separate from life, but woven into it. And when you begin to live in alignment, when your inner world is not at war, but in dialogue, the world around you begins to reflect that harmony. This is the deeper meaning of attraction. Not broadcasting a perfect thought out into the void, but becoming the version of yourself who is ready to receive what you seek. And when you become that version, life responds. And that brings us to the moment of insight. The shift from trying to do manifestation to become the kind of person who naturally creates. So far, we have explored the shadow, projection, and the quiet intelligence of synchronicity. Now we begin to connect these ideas to something more familiar, the desire to create a better life, not as fantasy, but as foundation. And for that, we turn to one of the most well-known books on success and manifestation of all time, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Hill outlined principles such as desire, faith, autosuggestion, imagination, and planning. These ideas have helped millions, but when practiced without psychological integration, they often fail to produce lasting transformation. This is not because the principles are wrong. It is because they are incomplete. They speak to the conscious mind, the king issuing decrees, while ignoring the unconscious counsel that may have other plans entirely. Let's look at Hill's major teachings through the lens of Jung's psychology. Hill teaches that a burning desire is the starting point of all achievement. But Jung would ask a deeper question: where is that desire coming from? Is it truly yours, or is it compensating for a wound? A desperate desire for wealth may hide a deep fear of scarcity. A hunger for recognition may mask a shadowed belief of invisibility. If your desire is rooted in a fragmented self, it will recreate that fragmentation, no matter how strong the effort. True desire must arise from wholeness, from clarity, from the part of you that is no longer running from something, but moving towards something meaningful. Hill speaks of unwavering faith, the absolute belief that what you seek is already yours. But forced faith becomes denial. It is another layer of paint over the mold. Real faith is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to move forward while acknowledging fear's presence. To say, a part of me doubts, and I am walking anyway. When you integrate the part of yourself that feels unworthy or unsure, your faith becomes resilient, because it is built on truth, not illusion. Hill encourages daily affirmations to reprogram the mind. But affirmations are seeds. If planted in soil that is riddled with unconscious shame, fear, or resentment, they cannot take root. Jung would urge you to tend the soil first, to remove the psychological rocks and weeds through shadow work and integration. Then does the affirmation, "I am abundant, I am loved, I am enough," have a chance to grow. Hill instructs us to imagine our goals vividly and to build detailed plans. But what happens when your imagination is hijacked by anxiety? What happens when your shadow fuels your plans with fear? Without integration, the ego imagines success while the unconscious plans failure. But when you are whole, when your inner system is aligned, your imagination becomes a tool of clarity, not confusion. Your plans begin to unfold with less resistance because there is no longer a civil war inside you. This is the new foundation, a way to align the entire psyche, both conscious and unconscious, so that manifestation becomes an expression of your inner coherence. You are not just thinking new thoughts. You are becoming someone new, not through force, but through integration. And once that happens, you no longer chase your dream. You embody it. We began this journey with a quiet frustration, the feeling of being stuck, of trying to think better, feel better, manifest better, only to find yourself trapped in the same cycles. The life you longed for is always just out of reach. But that struggle was never a sign of failure. It was a signal, an invitation, not to try harder, but to look deeper. Through the lens of Carl Jung, we have seen that manifestation is not about forcing your mind into a false state of perfection. It is about recognizing that your outer world is already a perfect reflection of your current inner state, including all the parts you are not yet conscious of. Your repeated patterns, your self-sabotage, your emotional triggers. These are not flaws. They are messages from the unconscious. Messages asking you to come home to yourself. The world may tell you to chase your dream, but Jung would ask you to understand who is doing the chasing. Are you moving from a place of wholeness, or are you trying to escape the parts of yourself you have not yet accepted? This is the foundation of true manifestation, not magical thinking, but psychological integrity. Not bypassing the shadow, but integrating it. Not rejecting your pain, but listening to it. This work is not easy. It is not fast, and it cannot be done by pretending to be someone you are not, but it is worth it. Because when you do this work, you stop being a victim of unconscious patterns. You become a conscious co-creator of your life. You do not have to manifest your dream. You become the person who can live it. And then it comes. Jung wrote, "Meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. And that is what this path gives you, not just success, not just progress, but meaning." If this message speaks to something real inside you, then you are not alone. Subscribe and join a community of people committed to doing the real work, the work of becoming whole. And if you feel called, share in the comments. What is one aspect of your own shadow that you are now willing to face with more compassion and curiosity? Because your story matters, and in sharing it, you may help someone else feel a little less alone in the dark.